Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today I am buzzing. I've got my mate back on here, Nick Edgar, the highly sensitive guy. Yeah. Every time, man. You do it every time. You've got the energy. It's the football hooligan in you.
Oh, mate, we'll get to that.
Yeah. How you been keeping, my friend?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. It's really good to be back on here sort of so quickly after the last time I was here with my partner, Jess.
How long ago was it?
I don't know, maybe 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks.
Oh,
something
wow.
like that.
Time flies, doesn't it, while you're having fun? And then you went on holiday.
Yes, just got back.
Let's do the nice trivial bit. How was the holiday,
mate.
dude?
The holiday was a little bit of everything, mate.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, so drove into France, so got to understand what that was like, crossing a border in, the world of Brexit and all that kind of stuff. And
Is it different?
it's a little bit different. There's more documents to do and all that kind of jazz. And I was eating a ham sandwich and got that taken off me.
Do you think they're being
no
a
one
bit
wants a ham sandwich taken off you.
Are they being a bit pedantic with us now? Because they're like, right, you Brexiters, we'll show you what we can do.
I couldn't possibly say.
Yeah.
But if I was French, I might take that view.
Yeah. So, and
But no, it was
again, is
great,
there
mate.
other
It
sort
was
of
great.
bureaucratic bits that you got to go through?
Not too bad, mate. To be honest, I think all things being equal, it was pretty seamless. But I think the best thing about it was I haven't had a holiday of nearly 3 weeks in my entire life. I don't think, really.
Was it 3
It was
weeks?
nearly
was it?
3 weeks.
Oh,
we
wow.
planned it for a year because we're still fairly new in business and we knew it'd be a really hectic 12 months. So we kind of planned it and stuck to it. But then sort of
Didn't as
there's
well.
no kind of nice leading sort of calm down into the holiday. You're kind of working all out and then suddenly you're on the holiday and then it kind of hits you. It just takes you a bit of time to kind of come back to yourself. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of stuff can happen when actually we carve out those times. So it's absolutely brilliant. Loved it. But then it's like, oh man, it's like, am I allowed to do nothing? Do you know what I mean?
Really? Do you struggle with that?
I don't struggle with it all the time, but I feel like sometimes we can work our way into positions really with good motives and full of enthusiasm and then actually realise we're actually spinning a lot of plates. And that can bring forth a lot of emotions and a lot of parts of ourselves which are then a separate plate to kind of deal with as well.
Yeah.
So those are the most challenging moments for me, I think. That's what I struggle with sometimes when I find myself in that position, because it means I'm going to have to find time to sit and reflect if I haven't got it, like I did on the holiday, and put myself first and potentially talk to people with difficult conversations and undo some of the things that I've done because I'm not going to be able to cope. Because I know from experience, if I don't do that, if I try and please everyone, if I try and keep going, I'm going to burn out.
Sure. And like you say, very new to business. Can you just let the audience know what that business is for the ones that mayn't have seen the first podcast that we did together with your partner Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a person, discovering that I'm highly sensitive as a personality trait's been game-changing for me. That happened a couple of years ago. For those of you that haven't seen the first podcast, it's basically a personality trait. It's not a diagnosable condition. Something like, the figures are different. There's still research being done, but maybe something between 15 and as much as 30%. We're all, as human beings, on the sensitivity spectrum somewhere. We all feel sensitivity. But if you're highly sensitive, it just means that kind of sensory processing is just that much more intense, which can be good and can be really challenging.
Sure. So you're doing that as a business in helping coach people.
Yeah, so for me, what's come out of that in terms of managing and learning about my own sensitivity, as well as having coached in different arenas, coached in a corporate world, coached in the sporting world, which are different types of coaching, and thinking about and reflecting on my own life story, I just feel that what sits behind that is learning to understand ourselves emotionally. And just how complex and never-ending that process is. And I've personally decided that I was just pulled towards learning more and more about it. Now that I've done that, I've just developed this absolute passion and purpose for wanting to serve other people by supporting them to understand themselves in a way which can allow them to potentially reach their own potential, whatever that might be. And that, for me, just lights me up.
Sure. And So when you're on holiday and you're building this business and it's all bubbling up, and then you've got to take a switch off from it, what is that feeling like? And did you genuinely manage to do that for the 3 weeks? Or were you, when you go to a restaurant or then you go to a cafe or whatever it is, are you just, because creative minds, it's in the moment. And if you let that go, it can just seep away then.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's for me where, so consciously try to switch off and manage that for quite a lot of the time. But you're quite right. Inspiration hits when inspiration hits. For me, that's where your daily rituals come in. So a big part of my daily rituals is to journal.
Awesome.
So that can look in a number of different ways. It's not always writing words. It's not always storytelling about what's happened. It's not always well thought out. Sometimes it's just scribble. Sometimes it's a picture. Sometimes it's just, it just depends how I'm feeling, But committing to that as a process means that in those moments, for example, in a restaurant where this great idea hits, or suddenly we find ourselves talking about it and we say, or I say, or she says, let's just time out. This isn't the environment for this. It's great we've had that idea. Let's purposefully park it, and then we'll come back to it in the morning or the next time we're going to...
That's really helpful and healthy. And just for how long we've been going? 8 minutes. And I've learned a real big truth there for myself, because I think without the structure in my life and just being creative and enjoying the moment that it comes in and then imposing it a little bit on my partner, I've got this idea, what we're going to do, and not knowing where they're at and how receptive and ready they are for those ideas to come, that's where the clunkiness and the clumsiness and the pain can start to arise from.
I 100% agree, but I think because a big part of what the vast majority of us are hot-wired unconsciously to do is to seek connection. And one of the best ways to seek connection is to talk about our
Especially
ideas and our thoughts and feelings.
Ones.
100%. And we want to be seen and heard as well. But you're quite right. It's sort of... And this is why emotional understanding and regulating that and learning to do that can really help. Because if you think about what are the emotions, I'll throw this at you, what are the emotions that are associated with that moment of inspiration when you're buzzing and you're called to share?
Yeah, excitement, adulation, is that what?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just readiness.
Yeah, so you're buzzing and you want to share those emotions. But as you said yourself, you don't know where your partner is or whoever it is you're going to share them with. They might be having an absolutely raggedy ass day, and they may just not have space to do that. But then you're caught with the decision of, okay, how can I almost bottle that, check myself, think about, are they ready to hear me, and actually have it within you to say, can you hold space for me a minute?
Yes.
Because I've had this incredible idea.
Yes.
Rather than just launching into it.
What do you think to this? And then
have you got the space
a reaction
for it?
Straight away.
Yes.
So I just need the space for this right now. Let me go. If you haven't got the time for this space, also let me know. I will go and start writing it down. I'll find my own little space to do a free write or whatever I need to do.
Exactly. And I'm telling you, even as someone that's been really trying to bring this into who I am as a person in my core.
Man. This is great. No,
but I still struggle with it. I will still have those moments of inspiration, and almost like in childlike glee, I'll just blurt it out to Jess. And Jess would just give me that look of like,
glee is a good
you
word.
Didn't ask me if I'm ready to hear this, and I'll do it with her as well when she does it. So it's never ending for me. But I think ultimately learning to do that and practicing it and trying it and sticking with it, I feel can really support us in terms of improving that communication. It certainly lowers miscommunication and arguments and all that kind of stuff, which can never be a bad thing, I don't think.
Dude, that's wonderful. And that's why I wanted you on today. I saw you're advertising a new session, and we'll talk about that, of what you're going into. But I had that connection with you on this podcast, and I don't know if it's you're a little bit older than me, and I feel there's this wisdom that you've had through just simple life experience, but probably similar experiences as well in being involved in the sports industry. Just the character you are, I really enjoy it. I reciprocate it. It feels right for me. And I've got friends in so many amazing walks of life and industries and going into the coaching practice. But particularly with you, it really resonates how you deliver what you deliver. So I'm very much looking forward to having you involved in my life more, and I'm excited about this podcast. Then going into that coaching then, let's talk about you as a person, what you've been through, and then what this night is that you've got coming up, this coaching.
What I'm doing is I'm putting on like a free online story share, a bit of my personal story, and then just giving us a chance to get curious about some of these things we've just been speaking about. So it's actually your fault in a way, Mikey, that I'm doing this, just to put that out there. Yeah. So last time I was on the podcast and I was sharing a bit of my story, that's still something that I'm learning to do, like we all are, you know. I think it takes telling our stories a few times before we can do it in a way which is polished and to the point and gets a sense of ourselves across. Because, and that's okay, I don't think it should be aiming for that necessarily, but at the same time I think when we start telling our stories, we kind of want to be seen and heard, and we want to get ourselves across that we can go down different avenues and left and right and centre, because that's what we do as human beings. So when I was telling parts of my story, especially growing up as an aspiring footballer, I shared a story with you about being sacked from Reading Football Club for an incident which saw me pissing in a teapot, which we can dive into in a bit more detail. I'd quite like to do that. Now, I'd never done that before. I'd never shared that, certainly not on a podcast. And on reflection, when we listened back to it, I was really pleasingly surprised that I'd done that. I've done a lot of work around that incident and my journey in football generally, because of the emotions, because of the work that I've done as later on in life. I understand that I've sat with three main emotions for most of my life. Those are the three emotions I've experienced the most. The first one is shame. The second one is anger. And the third one is anxiety. So speaking about it's kind of opened the floodgates. And as a coach, I do a lot of this work privately with men and some women as well. And as I said earlier, I'm really passionate about it. But what I haven't done personally is actually talk about my story in a public setting, in my own time, where I'm leading that space. Yeah. So I'm just want to actually express some gratitude, because through being on this podcast, through doing that, that's why I've created the Football and Feelings Forum, which is what I've called it.
Football and Feelings. Yeah. And have you had many sign up yet?
Yeah, I've had a few. You know what these things are like yourself when you put events Burners. On. Yeah, it's good. It's good. And I think the only investment that you need to be part of this team is just your time and your energy. Yeah. Like, I want it as a free offering, because I want people to get a sense of just how powerful story sharing can be as human beings. Like, when we get to know our stories enough to feel that we can share safely, when we've dealt with the issues we're going to talk about in an emotional way, we're not going to put ourselves at risk by telling that story, whatever the content. And we're also not going to put the people we're telling the story to at risk. And I think that's really important.
Do you think there's ever a need for somebody to hide part of a story or their story?
Yeah, I feel that we can't constantly be completely open and honest every minute of the day that we have it. When we do that, Brené Brown, who I'm a big fan of, talks about that as floodlighting. So if you think about lights on a car, if you talk to me and say, I'm really paraphrasing her here. If you talk to me and say, I'm having a really hard time, Nick, and I say, well, that's all well and good, Mikey, but I've got a mate who tried to kill himself last week. You're going to go, fucking hell, I'm having a hard time. You're going to feel almost like someone's turned some car lights off at you. Whereas, like, if you say I'm having a really hard time, Nick, and I say, mate, talk to me about it. So I invite you in. She describes that as almost fairy lights. It's an invitation to come in.
She's good, isn't she?
She is good. Far better than me. I'm aspiring to be like this woman and many other people far greater than me. But look, but I think it's that, by doing that, by allowing you in to share your story safely, I might resonate with that, and then I might be able to say to you, you know what, I totally hear you, I feel you, I've had a similar experience, or actually I know this person that's had a similar experience, you're not alone, and that's different.
It's just interesting, because I've done 136 episodes of this podcast now, and I must admit the first 10 or 20 were probably what I wanted to do was share my story. And then eventually I don't really tell it as much anymore unless I go to an assembly or I'm asked to or whatever that is. But I really had a mental conundrum on how much do I share. I know it's worth sharing. I like that philosophy that a lot of us share. If you can be that person you needed when you were younger.
Yes.
And if you could just help that one person that needs to hear it. And I felt, my story very quickly is a really bad breakup. Then lots of substances, particularly psychedelics, got dragged into the mix. I learned so much here, but also the bittersweetness of this. I lost my mind through the process. The Truman Show become my life. I got drug-induced psychosis and schizophrenia. It was a dark, colourful path.
Yeah.
And, I work in schools, so I was really kind of hesitant. How much can I share? But eventually, when I built it to more of that polished state and I knew the worth in what I was saying, I managed to conduct it to where I thought, this is where it's right. There's going to be something from this that people can take away. It's not just throwing loads of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yes.
It's saying, this is the build-up. This is what I think your takeaways could be. And you'll find your own on the way. But I think there's enough substance in there to give you.
Yeah, and I resonate with that completely.
I must admit, after I did that, I felt completely bare. But it wasn't like I was trying to hide it all. I was like, here I am. This is it now. And I felt so comfortable in that. Then I got my jacket back on and I started listening to other people's stories then. And it's given me this open-mindedness and set of ears where nothing would shock me. If what anybody would say, I think it's all appropriate because it's all part of somebody's jigsaw, part of the story, and people will be able to take away their parts they want. So that's why I think just sharing is so integral.
Yes.
And I have so many conversations with people that go, I don't know if I should say this bit or what about this bit? And they're like, I think I'll tell you behind the podcast. And I totally get it because that's where they are in the timeline and where they are in their journey.
Yes.
But I just wonder eventually when you get to a certain stage, is it all out? Is fair game?
Well, there's a lot in there.
Yes.
And I resonate with so much of what you've just said. I think I still feel that listening to you reflect on your own experience in that you felt comfortable doing it.
Yes.
And I think that is the most important thing. I think we also have
you
to...
in the equation.
Yes, I think so, because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for ourselves. So that floodlighting I was talking about, if I talk to you in a way which you can't hear it because it is too much, or somebody can't hear it because it's too much, they have a responsibility to kind of say that as well.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And when we start telling our stories, we're not going to be polished. So we have to allow each other to make mistakes, to use the wrong words, to make errors maybe.
Yes.
If we're the person hearing it. So if you're telling me your story and I don't resonate with some of it, that doesn't mean you telling the story, there's anything wrong with that, or do you know what I mean? But on the other side of the coin, just as it's a skill to learn to tell our stories, it's a skill to learn to listen.
Yes.
And it's a skill to manage our emotions when we are listening to other people. And I think social media, which we touched on in the last podcast, is such an important part of that, because if we think about cancel culture and we think about how people react on social media, there's a stimulus, there's a reaction, then there's a post or a comment, and that's becoming normalized. Now for me, that perpetuates a kind of world where we're all kind of going like this, reacting off each other like popcorn in a fucking tin that you're trying to cook. It's all popping off everywhere, and like there's no actual real reflection in that. There's no kind of
just
understanding
reaction,
of what am I bringing to this reaction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
And I think that's really important to try and build into who we are as human beings. Just that recognition, because just having that, before I had that knowledge, I was like, well, if someone's triggering me, if someone's pissing me off, or I don't agree with someone, I'm not interested. Like I'm pissed off, and I'll have an emotional reaction. It'd probably be quite angry.
Yeah.
One of my freaky emotions.
Yeah.
So I just feel that there's these, I'm going to use your favourite word, nuance.
I knew it because it was going to come in the next bit.
Do you know what I mean?
Mate, that is so funny because, again, now we're nearly 30 minutes in, and I was going to say in my next line, and now the nuance comes into play, and I was going to smile with it. So I'm so glad you said it, because again, even for the sharing the story, and that's probably what I connect on most with you as a human, is your ability to be balanced with all sides of the scale and bring the grey into the equation. Because even the sharing a story, if I say you need to share all your story, rip yourself bare, just give it all out there, have the freedom, then the people that don't wish to do that can end up feeling like they're fakes or they're concealing something and they're liars, and they don't need to feel that way. And I love the first part of what you said there. It's you. What are you comfortable with? Why are you telling it? And is it helping? Is it serving yourself or others?
Yes.
If it's not, just keep it in the back burner, really.
Absolutely.
Unless you feel like saying that too, that's fine. But I love that you can bring that to the table.
Appreciate that.
So thank you for that, mate. That's a really good part of the chat. Where are you then with your storytelling? If you don't mind.
No, it's for me. I think when this is any of us, but for me, when I tell my story, I start with football because it was there from such an early age. I mentioned on the last podcast as well, there's being brought up in Catholicism, and there is like my dad's duality of being a teacher and really jovial at work. And I was at the same primary school as him. So those two things are kind of just slightly before football. Church is very like, you do this or you're going to hell. You know what I mean? You're a good person or you're a bad person. You're sinning or you're not sinning. It's really polarised.
No nuance.
Do you know what I mean? There's no nuance in my
and that's why I don't like it.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I do.
But like with my dad, it was more like, and I'd be really interested if you are the child of a teacher or you're a teacher with your kid in the same school. But my experience was anything I achieved was because my dad was a teacher at the school, not because of my own merits.
Yeah.
And at primary age, those two things leading into then being recognised as being good as football, and at the age of 10 being picked up by Spurs and going through academy systems. So those two things had a real impact on what I brought to that situation. So that when I got signed by Watford at 14, what I needed, I didn't know I needed this, but what I needed was to feel loved. So it wasn't just good enough to say, oh, we want to sign you. There are other clubs that wanted to sign me. What Watford did was invite me in, met the first team manager, saw a game, took me into the dressing room, shook hands with all the players. Felt like a god, do you know what I mean? I felt like this club really wants me. Just in the same way I was taught God really wants me if I'm good. And without knowing it at that time, I'm already developing my self-worth based on what other people think of me and judge of me.
The agreements.
Yes.
For you.
So I think under 14, under 15, under 16, when I'm at Watford, and I'm also traversing all the other parts of growing up, it's all based on recognition. It's all based on reaching that milestone of getting a contract. And there's actually, just diverge for a second, there's a programme on Channel 4 at the moment called The Academy, which is a 6-part documentary about this process I'm describing. Now, I'm describing it 30 years ago. It's happening now. There are some differences, I'm pleased to say, with some of what I'm about to say, but there's also some real similarities. So I'm going to sort of marry the two of them a little bit, if that's okay. But for me, I think when I was 16, I'm doing my GCSEs, crunch time's coming. I'm pulled aside by Kenny Jackett, our manager, who's ex-player and went on to manage a few clubs. And he says, Nick, you can absolutely... You've got more than enough talent to be a professional footballer, absolutely. That was all I heard. I was like, well, that's it. I've got my contract. Like, it's coming. I'm going to get it. And he went on to say, like, sometimes, you know, you could work harder, you could do this and you could do that. But all I heard was like, you're good enough to be a footballer. I've been there 3 years. I'm scoring goals. I'm playing well. It's a talented team that we're in. The same group of lads I'm with at that age has Robert Page, the current Wales manager. It has Bruce Dyer, who ended up being the first teenage £1 million player. It's got some good players in it, and I feel at the same level as them. So anyway, we turn up, and we're all in a big room. We're all in like a room, parents, kids, guardians, whatever. And one by one, they call us out as 16-year-olds to sit in a room full of coaches. The parents aren't there, just me and the coaches. Now, in the Crystal Palace documentary that's on at the moment, the parents are there.
Right.
Tick. That's a big change.
Wow.
But back then it wasn't. They tell me, we're not signing you. And I'm like, but you just told me I'm good enough. Like, why aren't you signing me? And they just said, well, we don't think it's, you've handled yourself really well. You've done really well. We just don't feel that we've got enough. We've only got a certain amount of spaces. We just haven't got it from you, for you. So I felt like this crushing rejection in that moment. I'm trying to relive it without reliving the emotions. And what I'm feeling is almost like that. You see it in war films when a grenade goes off and it's just that sound, that ping sound.
Yeah.
You're not getting a contract.
Yeah.
I'm not really listening to anything else it's saying. I just want to get out of that room, and all my efforts going into not crying my eyes out in front of these men. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just to suck it up, because that's what I've been told for, is suck it up, do your best, go. It's a test of character, it's this, it's that. My self-worth is just on the floor at this point because I've been rejected. So after that, thankfully, what happens when kids get rejected? If you think there's 92 league clubs, there's 18 to 20 kids, all at under 16s. They'll generally take maybe 8 to 10, up to about half of those lads on to the next stage of first stage academy contracts, which means that you've got, in the Premier League alone, you've got 200 kids at under 16 that have been released. So what do you think is going to happen there? Those kids are probably the cream of that age group. You've got the Championship kids, and the Championship clubs are looking to the Premier clubs, who have you released? And maybe they can take them. So you've got lads at that level that have been there for 3 years as well that aren't getting a contract because someone at a Premier club has been released. It's fucking brutal.
Wow.
It's brutal. And when you then go further down the leagues, the same thing's happening, except instead of 200 for the Premier League coming to the Championship, you've maybe got 350 from the Premiership and the Championship going into League One, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And it's like a mad scramble to try and get signed by anyone. And you're not doing your due diligence because all you want's that contract, because that's what you've been focused on for 3 years. Now, I was lucky enough to get a contract at Reading that was what is now League One. Watford were then in what's now the Championship. So I was like, fucking hell, thank God for that. Self-worth goes all the way back up.
Yeah.
Then it's like the guy that signed me at Reading is Eddie Nijveski, who's part of the first team management team. He saw me playing one of my last games for Watford. He's going, yeah, look, I want you. I don't know why they've released you. I'm like, I love this guy.
Yeah.
So I turn up for like first day of pre-season, and the whole first team management's moved on, including Eddie. I don't know a fucking soul there.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Like I barely know any of the players because I've come from a different club. I'm not part of their group. I'm moved away from home. I'm in digs with a family. So I'm coping with all of these things. And the only way to prove myself is to be on the pitch. And unfortunately, my 6 weeks into pre-season, I had a growing pains knee problem called Osgood-Schlatter's disease, which is in one of the worst states it could be. And I had torn my medial ligament in my knee because stepping up to full-time playing at 16, my body couldn't handle it. But again, I took that personally as I am a failure. You know, my body can't handle it. So I had to spend 8 months away from home in an environment where I didn't know anyone, and that was difficult. First week I was there, I realised I'm banging on here.
Mate,
you're right to hold space here.
Mate, I am
Fine.
fully immersed in this.
So the first week you have the whole initiation rituals. It's not singing a song. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's being held down by 8 lads that are in the year above you. It's being stripped naked. It's having a Hoover put on your cock and deep heat and ice cubes up your ass. It's sexual assault if you really, when we get to the bones of it, all under the guise of initiation. It's them being thrown outside of the ground and having to find your way back in naked.
Is this still a thing, do you think? Or
I fucking hope not.
I hope not, yeah.
I hope not. And actually, ironically, I'm the same age as that, you know, the famous like class of 92 at Man U. If you look at that documentary, the start of it, when they talk about exactly these sorts of things, they mention it without going into the specifics I just have. And they say they stopped it.
Yes. I
don't know if you remember that. It's part of that documentary.
Yeah, I remember it really well.
Maybe that's why they went on to be so successful, because of some of the changes they made.
The built brotherhood.
without being judgmental, Ryan Giggs is in the news at the minute, so I don't quite know what's
Okay,
going on with
yeah.
all of that as well. But anyway, I digress. So after having been rejected and having got a contract and then being injured, the fateful pissing in the teapot incident happened. You know, I've got back fit. It's the start of the next season. We've just 2 days ago had the first team photo and the club photo, and I'm in it, and I'm feeling like this is a new start. And then the year before, I had struggled so much being injured, and I struggled to fit in with that group of lads. I was an easy target for bullies, and I think one of the things about banter that I don't like is if banter is to create team spirit, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If banter is to pick on people and to leave them feeling shunned and small and full of shame, that's not banter.
Yeah.
That's abusive behaviour. But I didn't realise that at the time. So that night, what I'd done to survive was to start to act in ways which 2 or 3 of the biggest lads and the biggest bullies would approve of. One of which was pissing in a teapot. So anyway, cut a long story short, I did that. I got caught by the manager and I got sacked. I thought I'd be all right because there were a couple of lads doing it before I was doing it, these same lads. I thought this is all for camaraderie. I was sat in the manager's office and he said, I'm letting you go. That's not the behaviour of a professional footballer, which again is a judgment on me. And I didn't say anything. I didn't say, but everyone does it every week. Like 2 lads were doing it before me. I didn't do any of that. I kind of like, I'm not a grass. I just took it and I thought they're going to say something behind the scenes and I'll get away with this and I'll get a bit of a bollocking, but it's okay. And they didn't say anything. So I'm sat there and like and what Mark McGee, the manager, actually said to me, his specific words as I remember them were, if you challenge this decision, we will tell your parents what you've done. Which is a really shaming thing to say to a then 17-year-old. So, and I think having to then deal with what had happened in those 2 years over those 3 or 4 key moments, my self-worth was just on the floor. I was unfocused. I didn't know what to do next. I did join Stevenage Borough, who were then a high non-league team, pushing to get in the league. And I played some first team football there. I went back to school to do A-levels, which I wasn't engaged with. I even got picked to play for England Schoolboys that year, which was on the one hand could be an amazing turnaround story, but I'd also started smoking.
Yeah.
I'd also started smoking weed. I'd also started drinking heavily because I couldn't deal with my emotions through the previous 2 years and in the here and now. So on reflection, I was just self-destructing because I had no self-worth. So with Stevenage, Paul Fairclough, very successful manager there, said, I think you've got loads of talent. We can get you in the first team. We can get you up, but I want to do it slowly. I want to look after you. Music to my ears. Don't want you to end up like this lad, Bradley Anderson at St Albans City. You know, they played him too early. He's burnt out. I don't want that for you. Great. Music to my ears.
Going to look after me.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to get that love from a male figure. I'm going to get that respect. They're going to, do you know what I mean? I'm going to get that self-worth from this person. So I couldn't play a lot of the games because of playing for England games and stuff like that. And I had a couple of injuries as well. But I was playing a fair few first team games, but never being started up front. And I felt I was ready as we got towards the end of the season. And I'd worked hard that year to try and put stuff behind me, despite the weed smoking and everything like that. And then he signed this lad, Bradley Anderson, put him straight in the team for the last 15 games of the season. And I was just crushed again. Just crushed.
Yeah. What haven't I done?
Like I've done everything you've asked. All right, not everything. Let's be honest, I haven't. I'm suffering from the trauma of what's happened and I'm coping with it by numbing out. But to all intents and purposes, I'm doing what I can. But it's that disconnect, again, of do this, be this, to get this great goal of being a footballer. I'm doing that as much as I can, but less increasingly so because I'm taking all these hits. But that was crushing. And then the final part of this story, I'm pleased to say, in terms of my football journey, is that I was like, well, I'm leaving then. There was another club local, which was non-league, one league lower than that, Baldock Town. And their manager, Rob Eagles, I knew from when I was young. And he said, Nick, come and play for us. You'll get in our team. We've got a great forward here. We've got a great forward who's going to make it any day now. And I think you're as good as him. Potentially, you could even be better. And I want you to replace him. That forward's name was Kevin Phillips, who went on to be the last. He played for Sunderland, played for England, and we were at the same club at that time. It didn't pan out that he got signed as early as Rob thought. I couldn't get in the team. My attitude had dropped down another level. My numbing out was increasing. My anger on the pitch was increasing. I got sent off for the only 2 times in my career within 2 weeks of each other. One for kicking a player in the head that fouled me, which just isn't in my nature.
You got up and just swung?
Swung,
wow.
Absolutely swung. And then the other one was being flagged offside and me going over to the linesman right in his face and calling him a fucking cunt.
Yeah.
I've still got the sending off for him.
Wow.
So to think in terms of like from under 16 to then the start of under 19, which is only 2 or 3 years, all of that crushing meant I'd gone from being non-smoking, trying as hard as I can to be a model person and a model player according to what I'm being modelled, to then suddenly finding out, well, life's not quite like that. I don't feel worthy now. And in fact, not only do I not feel worthy, I don't want anything to do with football anymore.
Wow.
And I'm 19 years old. Oh. So the key thing about this story isn't, and I really want to stress this, it's not poor me. This happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, and this happened to me. So this is why I'm a fuck up.
Yeah.
Me sitting here now, that's not the story I'm telling. That is the story I told myself internally for 15, maybe as many as 20 years. That I am not worthy. I have failed. I have bottled it. I have walked away. I wasn't good enough. I didn't have the minerals, whatever you want to call it. As a man, I wasn't worthy because I couldn't handle it anymore. I didn't talk to anyone about any of this. It was all going on in me. I'm carrying all of this myself. And it did go on to affect how I was. Now, I'm not going to talk about what happened in the next 15, 20 years, but there's a lot of drug taking. There's a lot of trying to get self-worth from sex with multiple women, as many as I can. There's a lot of trying to impress in different environments, impressing, seeing something wrong as I saw it, getting angry, getting pissed off, getting disillusioned, and either losing my job or walking away from it. Like the same pattern of those 4 years are playing out again and again and again and again for the next 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
And all of this is happening subconsciously. And I really appreciate you holding space for this.
This is wonderful.
I
Honestly,
really
I'm really enjoying it.
It's the moment for me, if there is a moment, was when I'm talking to a counsellor. I finally decided to try and get some help because this isn't unsustainable anymore. I feel like I'm going to die if I don't sort something out. I'm depressed. I'm having suicidal ideation. It's not good. And after I get over that and I'm slightly coming back to myself and I'm telling my story just like I did, but I'm telling it viscerally and I'm taking no responsibility for any of this. It's all of their fault. It's all the manager's faults. It's all the fucking managers at work's fault. It's all my girlfriend's faults. It's all everyone's fault except mine. And I believe it. I believe it wholeheartedly. Then my counsellor says to me, Nick, I'm feeling your pain. I'm feeling it so viscerally while you're talking to me. I really am. I just want to reflect something back to you and ask you a question. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Okay, what? And they said, what is the one constant in all of these things? And I sat there and I was like, and then it just kind of hit me like a wave, but it wasn't like a wave. It was like a wave of soothing realization. And I just went, it's me.
Oh, God.
I'm the one constant in all of this.
God.
Especially, do you know what I mean? Especially as an adult. And from that point, about 10 years ago, that is when I really, really started to take responsibility for who I am, for owning my story, for being compassionate. That as a 16-year-old lad, doing what he's being modelled and it not working out for him, he's taken that as he's not worth anything. And I'm really compassionate towards that lad now. And I'm not angry at the coaches. I'm not angry at the world. I'm not angry at anyone because it's taken a long time. But I've processed it and reprocessed it and sat with what emotions do I want to feel? I don't want to feel anxiety. I don't want to feel shame. And I don't want to feel angry as my ways of being. And why do we feel those three emotions? We feel anxiety when we're uncertain about the future. Well, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know any of that. That made me feel anxious. Probably the shitload of weed I was smoking as well didn't help, let's be honest.
I think it just exacerbates how you're feeling at the time. So if you're feeling chill and cool, you're going to probably feel more of that.
And as a highly sensitive person,
yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The anger is feeling wronged. It's a response to feeling wronged in some way, to being triggered. Everything's triggering me. So my default setting is to feel anger. And when we feel emotions a lot, we get used to it. It becomes who we are. And lastly, shame. Shame comes from when we view ourselves in a way where we perceive other people are viewing us. It's not real. But we all feel shame. You know, if we all think, God, oh, how's my fucking hair, or how am I going to look on this podcast? Oh shit, everyone's going to think I'm a twat. Da, 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 da. Those I am statements. I am not good. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I'm an idiot. I'm ugly. I am this. I am that. When you make an I am statement that's negative, that comes from shame. And the antidote to sort of shame, and not antidote. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Often how we deal with shame is to become perfectionists. And to only want to show the world the very best of ourselves, and to not let people into what's really going on. So for me, and I think this is where it's similar to a lot of other people, when you have that realization and you get curious about it and you get compassionate with it, and you start to think, well, actually, I don't want to be out in the world this way and inwardly feel completely differently. I want the two to be the same as often as I can. How do I do that? And it starts with compassion. So that is what it is, mate.
That was absolutely stunning. What a story. When you said antidote there, or more the dealing with, what about the adverse of that? If it's I'm the shit, I'm really great, I'm this. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think then we're really looking into egoic protection.
Yeah.
And we're looking into blinding ourselves and not being willing to accept our humanity and our flaws. We go the other way and protect ourselves by saying, I'm the fucking bee's knees. I am the top dog. I am the bollocks. And that's how you are out in the world.
Yes.
And you can't be that either.
No.
None of us are.
Right. So this story here, this is a question that I'm going to penetrate with that. Good word.
Love it.
With that journey and the tenacity of what it is to be in the football industry.
Yes.
What do you think? Because it's kind of got to be a bit cutthroat, hasn't it?
Yes.
With the sheer amount of volume of people going into it.
Agreed.
There is an element where, well, we just can't. We have to filter. So what would have bulletproofed you a little bit better on your journey?
So for me, this is where duty of care comes in, and this is where bringing emotional understanding as part of any growth journey, whether you are an adolescent or even as an adult, is so important. So I'll give an example from the documentary, just to refer to that. The under-16 squad they were focusing on 3 of those lads in the squad. One of the lads in that squad was really struggling emotionally throughout the season at different times. He was struggling to deal with not getting picked when he wasn't picked. He was struggling to not have an impact in games when he wasn't having an impact in games. And he was visibly showing that emotion. He was kicking water bottles over and da-da-da. And nobody is addressing that with him at the time. Nobody is trying to up his emotional understanding and his emotional intelligence. They're just saying, you can't do that. This is a test of character. That's not how a professional person behaves, which is no change from 30 years ago. So for me, to answer your question, it's that. If we're going through any elite program, especially in our formative years, part of that has to be that emotional coaching, that emotional training, making sure that these players know if they don't make it, because statistically 99% of them won't, they're okay. They're still enough. They can still have the most incredible life.
Yes.
And I think that's the bit which maybe football, and I'm not anywhere near close enough to make an informed decision. I just want to stress that. But from my own experience 30 years ago and what I have seen on the documentary and a few stories I hear, not to mention if you Google in tragic young footballer deaths from suicide, the most high profile being Jeremy Wisdom a few years back when he got released from Man City. But there are a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I just start to think, well, what other elite things are happening where that happens? Now, I also want to say, though, that there are examples within football. One was in my timeline. Brendan Rodgers, the Leicester City manager, was at Reading when I was at Reading. He was a Catholic boy like I was a Catholic boy. He was injured pretty much the whole time I was injured. Now, for him, that adversity didn't he didn't make it mean I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. He made it mean I am going to accept this situation that I can't follow my football dream, so I am going to do for me what I perceive to be the next best thing and become the best coach I can. And he has done that. And he's not only done that, but a big part of what he does as a coach and his philosophy is that emotional building and that man management. Yeah. And that's why I've got the most respect for him. Another guy I've got respect for is Jamie Vardy, who's went through all of his being rejected, being tagged, going off the rails and coming back to be an incredible player. So it's not the things that happen to us that dictate whether we're successful or not. And it's what we make it mean. But if, as part of that journey, knowing most of us aren't going to make our dreams come true the way we'd most like them to, it's to develop that emotional resilience to know that you are still enough, you're still okay, you're still loved, you're still worthy, you can still go out and be and do great things in the world. And if there's one change I'd like to see, it's that comes to the surface of all areas of life. You know,
I'm going to link you up. I had Stephen Warnock on the podcast, and he's doing a really similar thing, and his story was all about never being enough, and even to the levels that he achieved, the Liverpool and being Champions League and stuff, but then ended up Derby and Leeds, and he saw his whole career as a failure. And
I think that just goes to show, doesn't it, that what we perceive as success, what we perceive as failure, what we perceive as self-worth, it comes from within. And it comes, but to be supported in that, that's where we need, whether it's parental, caregiver, guardians, teachers, work placements, each other. There has to be that kind of acceptance and encouragement that we're all enough just as we are.
And is this seeping into the game then through this documentary? Are there protocols being put into place to really support people on their mental journey?
So again, you know, I wouldn't want to make a black and white 100% judgment on any of this. My perception and my experience of watching it is that some of this has moved on quite well. But the example I gave of that 16-year-old that was struggling, when he gets released, the point in the documentary where he gets released, they don't say to him, we're releasing you because you're not impacting on games and emotionally we feel you're unstable for what's needed in professional football. And as I said, they've not helped him throughout that. What they actually do is say, you've been a credit to Crystal Palace for the last 7 years. We want you to go where you will get more regular football. It's a cop-out. And you look at the faces of those coaches saying it to that kid and his dad. And again, it's my perception, but I feel like that could be handled better. Do you know what I mean? At the same time.
How so?
Well, as I said, throughout the season, when the lad's struggling in those moments of emotional outburst.
The man management.
The man management what about, you know, a lot of the training I've done and qualifications I've got in things like NLP are really important because they can be used as tools to learn to self-regulate our emotions, to actually, when we get those experiences over and over again, which we do, to have a different reaction. So if that lad learns or is taught to have a different reaction, he may still not get signed, but the next environment he goes into, he's going to feel worthy and he's going to be better equipped. And I think that's the point.
Completely see where you're saying. One thing, and I don't want to lose this point, what you spoke about in the story was about camaraderie and banter. Good word. That needs to be spoken about. So if we could do a little bit. How do you differentiate banter, healthy banter, camaraderie, and how can you sort of position yourself with that? 'Cause I've got a lot of friendships that were always based on banter, and actually they didn't recognise it was becoming really hurtful and piercing.
Yes.
And also me, I would have joined in with that, and thank God when it wasn't at you, you could direct it on somebody else and just be hopeful it wasn't going to turn back around to you.
Yes.
So, yeah, where is your line with that? Yeah.
It's a great question, Mikey, and I think it's one of the most important questions that we can ask and become curious about the answer to. So I'd probably reflect back that there's maybe not a line, but there is an emotional experience. It always comes back to that for me. But but it is because and you almost answered your own question, I think. Like when there's banter and Mickey taking, if it is done for the purpose of bringing people closer together,
Yeah.
for togetherness, for team spirit, making sure when banter has happened that we check in. And also feeling comfortable enough, if you're the one on the receiving end, that if you are uncomfortable, that you can speak out and say, you know what, I feel a bit uncomfortable. When I did that in those ages, I just got more of it.
Yeah.
Because they knew I would react.
Yeah.
And it was seen as a character flaw that I reacted. And I think that's something I've always been uncomfortable with.
You're flooding things back to me that I'd not thought about for years and years and years. And I remember being the one that would react so over the top
Yes.
that everyone found it so funny, and it'd always get me an exclusion or out of class. And you just saying that, I swear to God, I've not thought of for years, but I remember they used to do it just for that bit of a laugh and
Absolutely.
reaction.
Because think about it, the other part of what you said, which was when it wasn't happening to you, when you were part of the group giving out the banter, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. When I, as I did, always try and be, after that experience with football, be in the group giving out the banter and never wanted to be on the end of it, I felt safe.
Yes.
And that feeling of safety and connectedness is important as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
you
it's
get
not
an
authentic.
exhale as well. You're free from it for a minute.
100%. You're like, thank fuck it's not me.
Yeah.
Thank fuck it's whoever. But then it's generally, I find, when it's happening within a group of people, whether it's a sports team, a workplace, a family even, like if it's happening to the same person or persons over and over and over and over again, I don't see how that can be team building. Because you are polarizing and you are setting that person apart from the rest of you.
Yeah.
And that for me, when we use the word banter, is what I think about.
I think it needs to be earned banter. I've got a best friend, and we've been on such a journey together, and he says some of the most terrible things to me, but I know exactly where it's coming from. And it's because we've earned this mutual understanding and respect of where we stand, and actually it's always love.
100%.
And we can see the tone and the cadence, and when it's coming from a different place, we'll check each other very quickly. It's like, dude, are you all right?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not. I've had a bit of a bad day and I've put it on you. I'm really sorry. And it's picked up quite well. But I suppose that's because there's a maturity there now.
Yes.
We know ourselves really well and we know our dynamic. And that's kind of the trickiness around all this. Is you've got to teach people who they are and help them discover themselves first before you can just start throwing them into places with new faces and then let them banter just be the mixture of which you bring yourselves together.
And also, there are certain situations, in fact, there's more of these than not. There's situations in life where you're going to be spending time with people you're never going to be able to develop that level of closeness with because of the environment within which you're interacting. So a workplace is unlikely to really ever develop that, or it's going to take a longer period, pound for pound, than a friendship. And you've got people coming in and out of that group all the time.
Yeah.
Same with a sports team. You can have people coming in and out of sports teams all the time, some that stay. So I think you're absolutely right. Over time, that is where it becomes safer. And then again, it's not about what you're saying to each other. I mean, you're right. People I feel safe with can say and receive some fucking brutal
It's
things.
madness. Yeah.
They're also really funny.
Yes.
But they're only funny because I know it's coming from a place of love, just
and there's
as
so
you
much
said.
context behind
And
it.
we've built that.
Yes.
We've built that through compassion. We've built that through comradeship. We've built that through teamwork and love.
Yeah.
And all of these things which sit as a bed to allow that brutal banter to sit on safely.
Yes.
Because no one's going to go away from that feeling picked on, worthless, upset, any one of these other emotions which can be really detrimental to our health.
Mate, I make clips of this podcast, and not only is that one of the clips, it's going to be one of my favourite clips. I've got on my Instagram all my saved bits, and I really love what you said about banter there, and I've never thought of it in such a way.
Yeah.
So, would you advocate then, or think, if we're taking it back to football and sport, that there really needs to be a process and an idea around how you allow it into those facilities and into the changing room, and it needs a true leader to be able to be around and listen out for it and know what their sort of boundaries are with it.
Correct.
In the room.
Yeah, and to grow it
Yeah,
organically over a period of time, as you were saying.
That's man management. That takes some doing.
100%. And that as leadership is actually not about dictating, saying this is how it's going to be.
Yes.
And wherever you all are right now, I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming into this new, amazing, wonderful place where banter can exist safely. It's about an assessment of, well, where are we? And it's about co-creating it, I think.
And then
it's co-creating that space and that
word.
shift.
And it comes to asking better questions.
Yes.
And being a good questioner rather than a dictator.
Correct.
Of you will act like this in this facility. It could be, is this helpful? Is this conducive to a good team spirit in this facility?
Exactly.
Do you know how they stand on that? Could have been a racial remark, a sexual remark, or whatever it is. Hang on a minute, before we allow that into here, what's it going to create for us?
Yes, and depending on where the culture is at any given time, will dictate how hard or otherwise it is to do all of what you've just said. Because if it is a culture of harsh banter, which is aggressive and unhealthy, to try and be the person, either because it's happening to you or because you're viewing it happening to someone else, to stand up and say, hang on, I've got a problem with this. To take that first step is leadership of the most, and vulnerability of the most incredible kind.
Yes.
And really difficult to do. So there's something around that as well.
Just when you hear the Premier League managers talk at the moment, the ones where I see quote unquote most success are always with real respect in their essence, respect at their core. Look at when Leicester City won the Premiership title. Is it Ranieri? Yeah.
Yes.
Just a really lovely human. Do you know what I mean? And I can really, from what you're talking about, I can picture the way that he curated that whole dressing room environment.
And probably those around him.
Yeah,
A team of however many people.
Well, it emanates, doesn't it? It just spills over and spills over. This is what we're going to do here.
Yes, and I think you have to also, if you want to take that particular example and widen it into football in general of what makes teams successful or not, the Leicester example is an example where a team that's got nearly relegated the year before gets rid of the manager, brings a new guy in, and somehow everything shifts. But that's on everybody, I think. That's on all of those players that were there that previous season.
Conscious decision.
Stepping up. And that takes leadership within that group outside of the management.
Yeah.
That takes peer leadership and peer support. And that, we haven't even talked about that today, but peer support is something I'm massive about, because it's where we all decide as individuals, wherever hierarchically we might sit in any organisation, we decide culturally we're all going to be leaders.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is we're all going to contribute equally to creating the environment that we want to create the best amount of success. And I think that's massive. I think whether it's planted there as a seed by the manager in football terms or not, it takes that for a team to be successful. Because I just feel, look at sort of so many other, how many football teams fail, and the churn of managers, how many there are, and how quickly success has to be built. And I feel like, well, how can you build success that quickly unless you're very, very lucky and the stars align and everybody takes that collective step up. I remember right. So I dipped into football management for a while at not senior league level, right? I was mostly terrible, I hasten to add. But I set up this little Facebook group. I'm digressing here again. But I set up this Facebook group really just to kind of help manage the availability and all that sort of shit. But we were struggling and underperforming as part of this season. So what I tried to do was to put into this group occasionally some, little kind of G me ups and all this kind of thing, just to try and get people thinking, try and, just get a little bit of a marginal gain for the next game. So one of the most ones I remember is we'd lost a game we shouldn't have lost. And I said, lads, look, we've got loads more games this season. Let's put this behind us right now. However, I think all of us, if we really reflect, we probably didn't bring our A game, myself included. Imagine what would happen if we turn up next week, having given an extra 5% each. That's a hell of a lot of percents between a squad. Do you know? I think how powerful that would be. So I said, so what I want you to do between now and training is I want you to sit and I want you to ask yourself, what can I do better? And there's me thinking, fucking hell, that's one of the best things I've ever written motivationally. Yeah. So I've gone to bed. I'm thinking, oh, fucking great manager. I woke up the next day and there's comment after comment after comment after comment. And you know what those comments say? Nick, we need to play this formation. Nick, we need to train twice a week. Nick, you need to do this. Nick, you need to do that. Because when I said to them, ask yourselves, what can I do better? Every single one of that squad read it as, what can I do better as the manager? Do you know what I mean?
Mate, that's so funny. That's really funny. That's really funny.
Like, wind out of my sails.
No ownership whatsoever. No. They're just like, what could the manager do?
Do you know what I mean, though? So, but that for me told me two things. I learned two important lessons that I have as part of my coaching practice now. One is language is so important.
Be impeccable
what
with
we
your
say
word.
And what we mean isn't necessarily what's understood.
Yeah.
And the second thing was just like to check understanding. Do you know what I mean?
Are you all okay with that?
Are you all okay with it? So all of these experiences, but I'll never forget that.
That is really funny, man. That's a great anecdote. I really enjoyed that. So another thing I was reflecting to throughout all this podcast and the story is, as a parent, I'm a parent, I want Ella to go on and do whatever she wishes in life, but if she's getting into elite sport, how I could support her and give her the best of opportunities and the best of life lessons through the way. Did you have much of that?
That's a really good question. And actually, I had... One of the things we touched on a million in the last podcast, my dad was brilliant as far as that went. Like, he really was. And the reason he was brilliant was because my dad was quite talented at a number of sports. My granddad was like, you're not doing that. It's not safe enough. Be a teacher, get a career, get a trade, do whatever. And that's what he did. So with me, he was like, just go and do it. Just go and enjoy it. And that was great. But we didn't have the emotional relationship, which was both of our responsibilities. Even though I was young, it's my responsibility as well to be able to say, Dad, I'm struggling. I'm really struggling in this environment, or I'm having a hard time. That sounds he's just going, I'm doing a great job because I am giving you what I never got. And we hear that a lot with parents, don't we? I want to hasten to add as well, I'm not a parent. So I was going to say, it's an arena where I feel uncomfortable to talk in sometimes.
To a degree, it's a kid's responsibility, but also not really, because you're a kid. You've not got the emotional intelligence of that, and I think the parent needs to understand to be able to dig in a compassionate and loving way of, are you okay though? Are you understanding how you're feeling?
I think I'll check myself on that, Mikey.
I don't know if I can imagine a kid understanding how to feel. It's like hollow feeling, and they would just go through that feeling when it probably does need checking a little bit.
You know what? I think what's just happened, I'm going to reflect on what I said. Thank you for saying that, because I think you're absolutely bang on. I think what came up then was the remnants of that shame part. I should have reached out to my dad.
Yeah.
Which actually, I'm glad that's happened, and I'm glad that's happened here, because when we tell our stories and when we do work to heal and recover and grow, and then we put ourselves in a position to support other people, I think it's really important to recognise that we still have to work through these things.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Everything that I've said today, I still have to work through.
Yeah.
And if I don't do things that are good for me, they'll keep coming up. I think for me in that moment, little Nick, who felt the shame and the anxiety and the anger, just came up then and took responsibility for my dad.
Yes.
In that moment,
Yeah,
it all
that's
happened
interesting.
subconsciously, but that's what's just happened.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right, because when I sit and think now, whose responsibility was it? Absolutely, it's my parents' responsibility to give me an environment that makes me feel safe to be able to say, I'm struggling.
It's when
And
I see
that
when I see a
wasn't there.
war or something, I just put the onus on the bigger power,
Yes.
on the ones that have got all the resources and materials and tools. Don't keep battering down on these guys. You've got to then take away and say, can we help you? Can we do something to support you? Rather than just firing aim. So, yeah, it's imagining as a kid, and I work with lots of kids and I've got my own now.
Yeah.
What tools do they have equipped at that age? What's in the box? And it's not a great deal a lot of the time, unfortunately. So, yeah.
I think you're right, and that's a really important point. It is, and I'm really comfortable to have explained it the best way I can, which is actually, I don't think that was myself, my best self saying that comment.
But it made
really
a beautiful part of conversation.
I know, but it's really important. It's a live example of what
Yeah.
can happen, especially when we're in a flowing conversation with people. Stuff will come up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we'll make mistakes, and other parts of ourselves will just come to the forum and just say, hang on a minute. Do you know what I mean? So I'm really pleased that that's happened. But look, we can get into the deeper level of what do we teach in schools? What are our values? What do we model as parents and peers and older brothers and sisters to each other? What is our culture? What we can look at it at any one of these levels and go as wide as possible. And the wider we go, the more difficult it gets. Look, I think, what could I have benefited from personally? I can answer that.
Yeah.
I'd have benefited from being invited to express my feelings and feel safe to do so, and feeling heard and seen.
They're all validated.
And being told I'm enough.
Yes.
Regardless of what happens. So that would have made an impact for me. So I think that directly answers your question of what can we do as parents to help our kids if they find themselves really talented at something. I think it's, check the kid wants to do it.
Yeah.
What are you bringing to the situation?
Brilliant.
And let them be themselves, and remember they're also growing up, and they need to be able to do that at their own pace, whatever that means for them. So I think it's part of that. It's probably just part of relationship building generally. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just getting to know this little person that's getting bigger and bigger, but also that has this amazing opportunity.
When you were thinking of the widening of how we could approach that and look at it, do you extrapolate why we have such an inability, or had an inability, to express emotions? Was it like the war times?
That's
where
a great question.
we sort of just go, get on with it, we need to do this now, and we get to this moment?
Well, I think it's important to recognise at this point, and that's a great example, and I will dig into that in a sec, because I'm definitely within that kind of camp from a history point of view. I think we also have to recognise that we don't all have the privilege to be able to learn to manage our emotions, to be able to have time to develop reflective practices and daily rituals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, some of us are quite literally having to battle to keep a roof over our heads and keep our kids fed and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to make that point.
Brilliant
it's easy for me as a white guy of
Which is wrong,
relative privilege to talk about this stuff.
It shouldn't be a privilege whatsoever. Like, if we get into education, that's where I truly believe we need to change systems and we need to change protocols of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, carry on with what you're saying. I just think it is wrong that it is a privilege.
I agree. And I think as men especially, emotional privilege is probably one of the few privileges men have never had, really. And I do think that in recent, and I use the word recent in the context of the history of humanity, but in recent history, my dad was born in 1940. So his first 5 years were with a world war going on, where horrific atrocities are taking place. And I came into this world in 1974, where it's still relatively generationally still there. My granddad never spoke about anything he had to do with the war. And I think that stoicism of dealing with emotions, of getting the job done, doing your duty, or blah, 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 blah. I do think there's a legacy of that. And I think bringing some attention to that and getting curious about it is a great thing to do, because I spoke earlier about the importance of bringing compassion to a situation. So I have every compassion for my dad and my granddad before him, that they never learnt to emotionally evolve and find the confidence to express that and create spaces for others to do that, because they were never modelled that themselves. So yes, in the here and now, I think there's a shift taking place. And for whatever the ills of social media, which are well discussed, it is also a place where you can connect authentically, if you're mindful, find other people who are similar, find people that are different, and have intelligent, rich conversations from a perspective of difference of opinion. That's what's really important in schools and education in general. That you can argue that we're creating trauma almost by focusing on academia predominantly at an age where, I mean, look, I'm telling you now that I found my purpose finally in my 40s.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like, so there's something there about what are schools there to do? And let's get curious about that for a second. What are they there to do?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it seems to be set up in a principle of, here's a list of things you can and you can't do, and the majority have these can't do's. Because look at the grading system, A, B, C, D, E. Like, the only way for that to operate and be functional and work is you have to have losers.
Yes.
You can't not, if everyone's got an A and you go for a job and you put an A in front of somebody's face, they go, well, everyone's got one of them. So you need to have people to mark it against. So we have to have losers in society. And then when you've got these bruised set of losers, you're asking them, what do you want to do with your life now? Well, everything's just shut, so I'm down here because they've based me on what really is just a memory test most of the time.
So what you're describing there, my experience of that, we're getting right back into, where do we get our self-worth from? And is it someone telling us we're a good footballer, that you can achieve this grade in this way, in this subject?
Yeah.
You know, you don't get GCSEs in emotional intelligence.
No.
Or kindness.
100%.
Or, financial acumen, or cryptocurrency, or any one of a number of things which are out there, and I think that's really important. But then again, going back to the question, we're being curious about what are schools for, do this, do that. Why is it that?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of to do it?
I suppose to have citizens that are law-abiding citizens that help function in a society that we've manifested and how we wish it to, which is pretty much about profit margins and capitalist sort of future. So people that can help that operate and function as much as possible. And then there are anomalies that slip through the cracks, but for me, that's kind of my outlook and understanding of what it's trying to curate.
So let's say that's the case.
Yes.
Interestingly, if you look at, say, LinkedIn as the biggest kind of job professional market, or you look at a lot of job adverts, the kind of skills that often appear are things like, this candidate needs to be innovative. Yeah. They need to be a team player and be able to work on their own.
People person.
All of this kind of thing. Yeah. Now, if you are somebody who hasn't questioned at any point during your life in the school system and just taken it verbatim, are you going to necessarily have those skill sets to be successful in that role? Yeah. I'm not sure you are necessarily. I'm not saying you're not. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's also plenty of examples, someone like Stephen Bartlett, like very little academic qualifications from school, incredibly successful. And there are countless other examples of that. So it can swing and about, but it's that messy middle of is it working?
I'm very passionate on education because I had such a horrid time in education, but it's getting progressively further apart from one another of what is needed in society to function and to have quote unquote successful, self-employed people, that it's wearing lots of hats now. People seem a lot more comfortable to be in this position over here while they're spinning a plate down there, and they're constantly networking and thinking of these sort of resources, whereas school seems very set up and designed for that philosophy of you have a hobby, but also you've got to really be focusing on a career thing that's a forever thing, and that doesn't seem to exist anymore. I don't know if I said this on the last podcast we did, but I say it a lot, and I actually had him on the last podcast. Is one of my really good friends, Martin Illingworth, and phenomenal character, really opened the doors back up for me in education, and he's the reason I go into unis and schools and all these places. It was our most viewed podcast, actually, so I'm glad of that, because he speaks all of this philosophy, and his latest book out is called Forget School, and he just went around and interviewed hundreds of quote-unquote successful young self-employed people, and he just asked them two questions. What did school teach you? What did you have to learn outside of school? And then lots of other questions came into the mix of it. But the list and the commonalities of everyone was the confidence I had to learn outside of school. But he doesn't just say, let's obliterate the system, let's just push schools away. He would like there to be less testing in them certain ways, and looking at building portfolios of all the stuff we have done, and keep like adding in certificates of I've achieved this and I've done this and I can do this. But from that commonality and that connection that he brought through the book, he just met all these vibrant, bubbly figures. And I think schools are changing. They are noticing this approach now and what is needed. And it's not becoming, the teacher's not obsolete anymore, but it's not, you're not the answer giver. You're the guide now. You've got to help them find how they place themselves in this society that's forever changing.
That's amazing to hear. No, that really is. I think as well, if you reflect on what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years especially, but also the last 10, 15 years with our access to information and connectedness and how much information we're now processing, that's going to create some kind of evolution and jump, which is going to require some kind of response. So think about what you've just discussed, but maybe in the context of health. Our clinical health system is very much focused on symptom and cure. You know, whatever's wrong with us, we present a symptom, and a GP will come to us from a position of excellence and give us that cure. They may not ask, well, what sits behind that cure?
Yes, that's a very, very good point.
What is the cause of the symptom?
Yes.
And I think that if we take a more holistic view with health, just as education, just as responsibility surrounding how we run our companies and what our values are, then you're going to get these incredible shifts. And I feel that we are in a time where it's easy to become polarized and disengaged and upset and see things that are wrong and need to be fixed everywhere. And I'm not invalidating any of that, but it's also a time where there's incredible possibility and creativity and collaborations and opportunities.
And that's what, when I was saying, it's not just let's get rid of the curriculum, which we could, but how do you put confidence into a curriculum? If we're doing Silas Marner or we're doing Mice of Men or whatever that is, where can you put performance practices in there where people can get up and say their pieces or give off presentations or whatever that is? So it doesn't mean it's this or that. It's tweaking systems and finding out how we can evolve systems.
Which is very much, I think, what us as individual human beings are all about as well. You know, how we are as individual human beings, it's very much the same thing. We can either stay the same and just act and live and not pay attention to what we're putting in our bodies or what we're saying out in the world or how we're behaving or the quality of our relationships, which is obviously more my area of interest and expertise. Whereas, but it's the same. It's all about tweaking. You know, I can't take on a coaching client and say, after a half-hour consultation, "Oh mate, I'll have you sorted in 3 weeks or 3 months." And I'd never say that. It's up to them to decide what they want to take on board and how quickly and how much of and what pressures they've got and all of that kind of stuff. but the tweaking is always a possibility. So going to what you're saying about the education system, I'm too far out of it. It's not my area of expertise, again, to be able to really comment on. But certainly from my own experiences a long time ago, I'm really pleased to hear that if there's an evolution starting to happen where there's a different emphasis and tweaks are taking place and discussions even are being had about what priorities should there be. If kids as individuals within a group setting are being opportunities to develop their emotional skills, to be given opportunities to express themselves messily, imperfectly, where they'll fuck up, and to be reinforced that that's okay, that is part of tweaking and growing. I mean, that's beautiful. I really hope that is happening.
And it doesn't even just have to exist inside of the school gates, but like you say, there's fresh, innovative ways. We're on a bus today, and this is where people are coming, but also what you're going in to do and coaching, and there's so much awareness around this now, and I think that's where schools will start to become a little more obsolete if they don't change their practices, because this is what's grown and this is what's sought out, and these opportunities where you're getting stages and then different skills and passions are emerging, people are going to cotton on to that and go, well, these amount of people ended up going to this thing and becoming full, whole people from it and growing great personalities and then becoming in powerful positions. We've got to go with that correlation then. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And again, for me, there's a symbiotic relationship between the individual and any of these group settings you're talking about. Like, the best way I can describe it is that this tweaking, this opportunity is always there. But a lot of the people that come to me feel stuck. They feel like they've lost that opportunity.
Yeah.
That now life is just going to be like this for the rest of time.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of sameness, a feeling of lack of opportunity, a feeling of lack of change is possible, that this is just the way it is and I feel outside of that. And that's the experience they're having. And I think some of our little people have that experience as well. Absolutely.
Completely.
So a lot of the work I do, and I think a lot of the work that anyone that are in any one of these spaces are doing, is to try and cultivate a belief system to tweak that, which says you are worthy, you do have opportunities, you are valid. Here's some opportunities for you to experience some new things. See what you think of it. Do you not like that? That's okay. Don't worry. It might not be for you. Try this instead. And that creation of opportunity and just trial and error of that kind of childlike joy in trying things that we kind of lose. It gets knocked out of us. Bringing that back into ourselves is so important.
I've genuinely been buzzing through all of this. Honestly, I love this conversation. I love you as a human. You're brilliant. Go on then, the course. We've not got into the meat of that then.
No, so it's really just, like I said, I want to be able to just give a bit of myself. It's a really important part of what I think is a general good guide to being a half decent person. It's a model which I have a lot of belief in, 5 ways of well-being. So we have things like connecting with people, we have things like moving bodies, we have always learning something, observing and being present, but also giving, whether it's our time or our money or our expertise. So I haven't done anything like that yet.
Yes.
So I'm offering an opportunity for people to come together and to hear a bit of my story, a lot of which I've given away today. Yeah. But from the context of that emotional experience for me, of what happened next, of that constantly feeling anxious, angry and full of shame, and what that did to my quality of life, and that I didn't feel there was any other way because I wasn't conscious of it. It was only when that moment came. So over and above the actual story sharing, I want to be able to kind of get curious about and have a discussion and just share a few of what, for me and through feedback from my clients, are some of the most powerful things which we can bring into our lives. So some examples of that are learning to improve our emotional vocabulary. I think I spoke about that on the last podcast. So when we say I'm angry, am I really angry, or am I these more nuanced emotions, you know, and being able to label the slight differences in feelings. You know, if I feel anger in my head, it's probably because someone has done X, Y, and Z, and what I'm really feeling is like bewilderment. I just can't believe that someone could say that. If I feel it in my gut, I'm angry, but maybe it's because I feel insulted.
Yeah.
And learning the different, even though they both show up initially as anger, learning those two different things. So it's just, I just want to throw that out there, and some tools in terms of how you can start to get curious yourself in your own time about that, because it's a tool that we can all.
What does that help then, to be able to distinguish between the two?
So I think it just helps us to it's that self-awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
To be able to understand what I'm really feeling and why. What are the things that are making me be able to differentiate what I've always thought to be anger now as those two things? That's really important. Developing that emotional vocabulary starts to make making changes easier. Just a few minutes ago, you said this tweaking. If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm just angry all the time," I can't do anything with that until we get curious about what does that really mean. And before we know it, by asking questions, by talking to them, by asking them to dive into it and get curious about it, suddenly they'll start saying, "Oh yeah, it's not actually anger, it's this, it's this, or it's this." Right, there's 4 of them there. We've got 2 weeks till next time we see each other. Which one of these 4 do you think you can focus on? Right, I'm going to focus on my astonishment. I'm going to focus on my reaction to social media when something hits my feed that I just completely disagree with, that makes me feel angry, but actually I'm astonished that someone has a different view. And we're going to work on that, and we're going to journal on that theme, and we're going to do some breath work on it, and we're going to do a whole load of other things around that.
Yeah.
And for me, that's how transformation takes place. It's not in doing some massive, big, crazy secret thing. It is just, it's getting curious about what's really going on, and allowing that person to find that out for themselves. And on this course, it's not a course, on this session, on this time together, I want to throw curiosity into the ring about our emotions as human beings, and hopefully give people tools to be able to then start to inquire. And if they decide that they want to take that further and find a coach for themselves, whether it's me or someone else, or maybe they decide they need to see therapy, or maybe they decide they don't need anything at all, but have just turned up and think that's cool. I'm all good with any of those outcomes. No. For me, it's about giving something, that 5 ways to wellbeing. I want to give something back. I want to give something for free.
Yes.
It does require time. It requires energy. It's about an hour and a half. It's on the 1st of September. Bit of my story. I think that helps us connect by sharing our stories. We've already proved that today and on countless other podcasts you've done, but then to give away some other tools. I think there's also like things that some people may not do or have time for, like reflective practice, like being able to explore what well-being and mindfulness really means, because it doesn't have to mean like kind of, you know, I'm going to sit like in this position, do you know what I mean? And meditate like that. It doesn't mean that necessarily.
For people.
I think it can be.
I showed you a message today from a friend, and he's just so far removed from woo-woo and spirituality and these buzzwords that he won't get involved, but he sees the desperation and the need for it. He knows he needs to change something, but he just doesn't want to get involved in this conception and this preconception that he's got of it. Yeah,
and I think that's a totally valid human reaction, because, but break that down, it's the trigger of believing something is the case, which is causing an emotional reaction, which is making me in conflict, because I feel like I know I need some of this, I just don't want any of it, because I don't resonate with that. So that's the beauty of this space, is that there'll be someone he does resonate with, and he'll learn about these things if he wants to pursue it in a different way that's meaningful to him. And that's the beauty of all of this. Like, there's no right way. No. It's what's right for me, it's what's right for you, it's what's right for him. And that's about getting curious, you know? Yeah. And I think, like, energetically, it's just going to feel good to get some people together that you don't have to like football to sign up for this. It's really about emotions. What do we make our stories mean? What impact can that have on us, good, bad and indifferent? And then to say, well, okay, take that part away. Let's get curious about some of these tools.
Mate, I want to work more with you. I really do. I'm going to get this podcast edited actually sooner so I can get it out and
Appreciate
really
that.
start trying to help people get to this, because I can truly, through the whole conversation we've had, see the power, the impact and the benefit that you're going to provide for people.
Yeah, appreciate
And your
that, mate.
story is so worth telling. Get a podcast, dude. I'm going to help you on that merit too, because you suit that form.
Pleasure.
Anything else you'd like to discuss before we go away?
No, I think, like I said, sort of this just happened organically, didn't it?
It's
Because
been
of the last
amazing.
conversation we had. It inspired the idea in me. I'm glad we've discussed that. Find me on Instagram at the Highly Sensitive Guy. There's go to my bio. There's a link tree there where you can just sign up for free. As I said, there's no actual financial cost for this. Just put your email in. I'll come back to you with the Zoom link. It's on Zoom for an hour and a half. Thursday the 1st of September, 7:30 till 9:00. Just get involved. Join the team, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome.
Mate, and do you think you're going to start doing it in person as well then? These
Well,
sort of-
and again, I think like I'm really passionate about growing my business and collaborating with people and reaching as many people as possible. And I think that's something which will happen organically in
'cause I'm
time.
thinking of a nice space that you could potentially do some of those things.
I'm definitely open to any collaborations.
Okay, I'll have a
Mikey.
think. I'm going to do it now. I'm doing that thing.
Yeah, I know.
Can you create a bit of space for me, Nick? Got an idea.
As soon as we get offline, mate, I'll sit down, we'll breathe, and I'll hold all
mate,
the space you
I've
need, mate.
absolutely loved today.
Yeah,
Thank
me
you
too.
so much. You're
Me
an
too.
incredible human.
You are,
And I can't wait to connect more with you, and hopefully some of this lovely audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do join us on the 1st, and thanks, man.
The 1st of September, isn't
1st
it?
of September.
You heard it here, guys. I'll do my bit. I always do this. I always will. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this. I always do, and I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. That is what you are. Just be nice.